Snow was falling heavily over Boston. Streets lay beneath a thick white coat, and lamplights stretched long golden shadows through the drifting flakes. The cold bit deep, and the wind whistled down the avenues surrounding Valentim Hospital, echoing like a lost choir. Laya Bennett stood in front of the employee entrance of Valentim Hospital, where she had worked 6 days a week for the past 3 years. The automatic glass doors had just locked behind the last departing shift. A notice taped to the window read, "Emergency services only due to severe weather." She didn't move, her breath forming soft clouds in the frigid air. Her worn coat barely held in the warmth. Snowflakes stuck to her golden curls, now damp and clinging to her pale cheeks. Her blue eyes, rimmed with exhaustion and sleepless nights, stared blankly ahead. From her pocket, she pulled an old wallet. Inside was a single $10 bill, wrinkled and soft from years of folding. It was all she had. Her thoughts went instantly to Noah. He was 6, her world. She pictured him sitting on their small, second-hand couch in their one-bedroom apartment, peeking through the frosty window, waiting for her. He had only asked for one thing this Christmas, a toy medical kit with a real stethoscope, the one he had seen in the hospital gift shop 2 weeks ago, the one that looked just like what the doctors wore. She had promised. "If I break that promise," she whispered, "he'll stop believing in magic, in me." She looked across the street through the pharmacy window. The medical kit still sat on the shelf. Price, $9.99. Her chest tightened. She could buy it, walk in, hand over her last $10, and bring a little wonder home. Then she heard the hiss of air brakes. A city bus pulled up to the stop beside her. Its doors opened with a groan. She turned her head and saw the digital display on the pole. Last bus, 9:45 p.m., only 15 minutes left. The fare, $2.75. Laya froze. If she bought the medical kit, she would have to walk more than 40 minutes in the storm. But if she used the bus fare, Noah would find nothing under their tiny plastic tree. She closed her eyes. The cold was seeping in. Her hands ached. Her stomach churned with hunger. Her legs were tired from standing all day, moving between patient rooms, changing bed sheets, checking vitals, doing the work that kept the hospital running but that no one ever noticed. But then she saw Noah's smile in her mind, the way his eyes sparkled when she told bedtime stories about brave nurses and kind doctors. His voice from the night before echoed, "Do you think Santa will really come this year, Mommy?" She opened her eyes and turned away from the pharmacy. She would walk. Within minutes, snow soaked her boots. Slush seeped through to her socks. Her fingers curled into fists trying to keep warm, but she pressed forward. Her hospital ID badge still hung from her coat, swinging with each step. "Mommy keeps her promises," she whispered to herself like a vow. A few blocks later, she approached the next bus stop near the old emergency wing entrance. A figure hunched beneath the awning caught her attention. An elderly man sat alone, wrapped in a tattered coat. His hands shook as he fumbled with coins, counting and recounting. His skin looked grey from the cold, and his swollen feet barely fit in his worn shoes. "Just a little more," he murmured. "Please, just a little more." Laya slowed. She watched him try to feed coins into the fare machine. The screen blinked. Insufficient funds. Her hand moved to her coat. The $10 bill was still there. The medical kit. Noah. The promise. But this man, he looked like he might not make it through the night. Snow swirled harder now, wrapping the city in silence. She stared, heart pounding, pulled in 2 directions, and then she moved. She stepped forward, knelt slightly, and placed the bill into the man's hand. "You need it more than I do," she said quietly. The man stared at her, eyes wide behind fogged glasses. His lips trembled. "You're giving me your last?" he asked. "You're not afraid of having nothing?" Laya smiled, a soft, real smile, the only light in that bitter night. "I still have love," she said. "That's enough." She pulled her scarf tighter, turned and walked on. Now she had no money, no ride, no gift, but her steps felt steadier, her heart somehow lighter. The wind still howled, the snow still stung, But Laya Bennett kept walking toward home, toward Noah, toward a Christmas she still believed in. The snow kept falling, heavier now, the world turning into a blur of white and shadow. Streetlights flickered behind a curtain of wind-blown snow. Laya pulled her coat tighter as she pushed forward. The city was nearly silent, except for the crunch of her boots on icy pavement and the distant groan of ambulance sirens heading toward Valentim Hospital. A few blocks ahead, headlights cut through the swirling snow. A sleek black limousine pulled slowly to the curb, its tires hissing against the slush. The door opened swiftly, and from inside stepped a tall man, his silhouette sharp against the storm. He was in his early 30s, impeccably dressed despite the weather. His long navy coat flared slightly with the wind, and his dark hair was swept back, damp at the edges from the snow. His features were handsome but thoughtful, deep-set eyes, a strong jaw, the kind of face that carried more silence than words. Dr. Graham Whitmore had been searching for his father for nearly an hour. When Walter Whitmore had not answered his phone, Graham had asked his driver to start circling the downtown blocks near Valentim Hospital. His father had a habit of wandering in the evenings, preferring to experience the city from the ground, not from penthouses. The former chief of surgery at Valentim Hospital liked to walk the streets where he'd spent 40 years saving lives. Usually it was harmless, but not tonight, not in this storm. When Graham spotted the familiar figure through the window sitting at the bus stop, hunched and fragile, he had ordered the car to stop. Dad. He rushed toward the bench, crouching beside the old man, just as Walter tried to steady himself against the cold. His coat was damp, his hands, despite gloves, were stiff from exposure, but his eyes lit up the moment he saw his son. "I'm fine," Walter said softly as Graham helped him to his feet. "Just needed some fresh air and perspective." "You could have frozen," Graham said, brushing the snow from his father's shoulders, his voice edged with concern and frustration. "Why didn't you call?" Walter looked toward the corner of the block, his gaze settling on a distant figure. A woman walking away in the snow, her hospital ID badge swinging from her coat. "She gave me her last $10, he said quietly, "and her scarf, a complete stranger." Graham turned, following his father's eyes. There, about 30 paces ahead, was a woman walking alone. Her golden hair peeked out from beneath a damp knit cap. Her coat was thin, too thin for this weather. Her boots were soaked, and still she walked. "Who is she?" Graham asked. "I don't know her name," Walter replied, his voice low with reverence, "but she gave without hesitation, even when she had nothing. You don't see that often, son. Not in 40 years of medicine." Graham hesitated only a moment before starting after her. "Graham," his father called, "go gently." He nodded. The snow made it hard to catch up quickly, but he kept his pace steady. When he reached her, he slowed. "Excuse me," he said gently. Laya turned, startled. Her cheeks were flushed red from the wind, her eyes wide, weary. "I think you dropped this," he said, holding out the scarf she had given his father, though they both knew it wasn't true. She glanced at the scarf, then at the man. His suit, his coat, the way he stood. He was someone from another world. "No," she replied quietly. "I gave it." There was a pause, long but not uncomfortable. "My name is Graham," he said. "That man at the bus stop is my father. I just wanted to thank you. You helped him when no one else would." Laya smiled faintly. "He looked like he needed it. You didn't even know him." "I didn't need to." Graham studied her, watching how she stood against the wind, how her lips trembled, but her eyes held steady. "Let me take you home," he offered. "Please, it's too cold, and you've already given enough tonight." She shook her head, a soft gesture, polite but firm. "Thank you, but I'll be fine." She turned, walking again, boots crunching into fresh snow. He watched her go, his breath misting in the air. And somehow, even in the storm, he couldn't stop watching. That smile, brief, real, had cut through the snow like light through glass. It stayed with him long after she had disappeared into the night. By the time Laya reached her building, her legs were aching and her hands were numb. The stairwell was dark, the bulbs overhead long since burned out. She climbed slowly, one step at a time, gripping the cold metal railing with fingers that no longer felt like her own. Her boots left wet footprints on the worn wooden floors of the hallway. She paused outside her apartment door, took a deep breath, and forced a smile onto her face. The second she turned the key and stepped inside, a small figure came rushing from the back of the room. "Mommy!" Noah's voice rang out like a bell, high and bright. He launched into her arms, wrapping his little hands around her waist. His cheeks were rosy from the cold air that still seeped through the thin window panes, but his eyes sparkled with hope. Did Santa come? Did he find us this year? Laya swallowed hard and hugged him tighter. "Well," she said gently, "he must be running a little late." Noah looked up at her. His brow furrowed for only a moment before his smile returned. "That's okay," he said with quiet confidence. "We still have Christmas, and we have each other." She felt the lump rise in her throat, but she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, "we have each other." The apartment was small, just one main room and a corner kitchen. The walls were bare except for a single drawing Noah had made at school taped next to the window, a picture of him and his mom wearing doctor coats. A tiny plastic tree stood on a crate in the corner, decorated with a string of dollar store lights and 3 handmade ornaments. It was warm inside, at least for now. The space heater hummed softly in the corner, and the faint smell of instant noodles lingered in the air. Laya helped Noah take off his coat, then hung hers to dry. He ran to the window, pressing his nose against the cold glass. "Do you think he's flying over the city right now?" She joined him, kneeling beside him at the windowsill. "I think he might be," she said with a tired smile. Outside, the snow was still falling. The streetlights below glowed through the flakes, casting a golden hue over the sleeping city. Somewhere out there, she thought, the man in the limousine was probably warm, probably safe, but she had no regrets. Later that night, after Noah had fallen asleep, Laya sat on the edge of their worn mattress, holding something in her hands. It was a toy medical kit, old, scratched, missing the thermometer. The plastic stethoscope was faded and the zipper no longer worked. Noah had carried it around since he was 2. She had planned to replace it this year. She had promised herself she would find a way. But life had a way of choosing differently. Her thumb traced the crack along the side of the kit. She thought of the pharmacy window, of the brand new version with working instruments and a real light, of how Noah's face might have lit up. But then she thought of the man at the bus stop. She pictured his trembling hands, the desperation in his eyes. She wondered if he had made it to shelter, if he had a blanket, a warm drink, if he was still breathing. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. She couldn't give Noah the gift she had hoped. But maybe, just maybe, she had given something else to someone who had even less. She lay down beside her son, pulling the covers up around them both. He stirred in his sleep, rolling toward her, one hand finding hers instinctively. Laya closed her eyes, holding him close. Christmas had not come the way she imagined. No ribbons, no surprises, no gifts under the tree. But in the quiet of that tiny room, with the snow still falling outside, she realized something else. Some miracles don't come wrapped. Some arrive in the form of a child's embrace, a shared blanket, a whispered word in the dark. And sometimes the greatest gift is simply knowing you gave all that you could. The morning sun filtered weakly through the gray clouds that still lingered over the city. Snow had stopped falling sometime in the early hours, but the world remained hushed under its thick white blanket. Inside the apartment, Laya was trying to get Noah to finish the last bites of his oatmeal. Her mind was elsewhere, on the empty wallet in her coat, on the ache in her legs, on how they would make it through the next few days. She didn't hear the knock at first. It came again, 3 firm taps. She crossed the room, brushing her hands on her worn sweater before opening the door. There, standing against the brightness of the snow, were 2 figures. "Good morning," said the man in the navy coat, his voice warm but measured. "I hope this isn't a bad time." Laya blinked in surprise. Her eyes moved from the tall man, Graham, to the older gentleman beside him. "Mr. Whitmore," He stood straight despite the chill, wearing a much thicker coat this time, a hand-knit scarf wrapped snugly around his neck. His eyes sparkled the moment he saw her. "I told my son I had to see you again," Walter said, "to thank you properly." Laya opened the door wider, still processing. "Please," she said softly. "Come in." Inside, Noah peeked around the corner, his wide eyes locking onto the older man. His face lit up. "It's you!" Noah exclaimed, rushing forward. "You're the man from the window. You told me about the snow and the hospital, where you saved all those people." Walter laughed, kneeling carefully to meet the boy at eye level. "That's right. You were standing there like a little snowman, weren't you? You gave me the best hot chocolate ever," Noah said, beaming. "And you said I had a healer's heart." "I still think so," Walter replied with a wink. Laya looked between them, speechless. "You know each other?" she asked. "I saw him waiting for you outside the hospital last night," Walter explained. "He looked cold. I thought he could use a story and some warmth. The hospital cafeteria was still open, so I got him some cocoa." Graham stepped forward, his hands in his coat pockets. He looked around the room, noticing the bare walls, the humble furniture, the small tree in the corner, and then turned his attention fully to Laya. "I'm part of a foundation," he said carefully. "One my father helped me start after he retired from Valentim Hospital. It's called Winter Haven. We work with women and children, mostly single mothers, families in transition. We help them stabilize, find housing, support, employment." Laya listened, guarded. She nodded slowly. Graham continued, "We have an opening, a patient advocate coordinator for one of the upcoming community health projects. It pays fairly, it's flexible, and more than anything, it needs someone who truly understands." She blinked, caught off guard. "You're offering me a job?" "I am," he said, "because what you did last night most people wouldn't have. You didn't just give money, you saw someone. You helped without asking for anything. That kind of heart is exactly what Winter Haven needs," Walter added gently. "Sometimes the people who've struggled the most are the ones who know how to lift others up. You understand what it's like to need help. That makes you perfect for helping others." Laya looked down at Noah, who was now holding Walter's hand like an old friend. Her throat tightened. "Why me?" Graham met her eyes. "Because you've been on the edge, and you're still standing. And because someone like you could help others find their way back." Silence filled the room, not heavy, but full of something new. Possibility. Laya nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "Let's talk." Outside, the snow on the windowsill had begun to melt, and inside, something else was beginning too. Quiet and unseen, but steady. A door had opened, not just the one to her apartment, but to something more. The days that followed were unlike any Laya had known in years. The snow still fell. The bills still sat unopened. The future was still full of unknowns, but something within her had shifted. She woke up earlier. She brushed her hair again. She laughed, not just for Noah, but because some part of her had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, life was changing. Winter Haven wasn't just a job. It was a sanctuary filled with people like her, women piecing life back together, children rediscovering joy, families learning to hope again. As patient advocate coordinator, Laya helped organize free health screenings, clothing collections, and emergency housing referrals. But what mattered most was listening, real listening. And through the quiet stories of others, she realized she was healing too. Most evenings after work, Graham offered to drive her and Noah home. At first, she declined, hesitant, but eventually she began to accept. Some rides were filled with small talk. Others passed in companionable silence, but it was always easy, always steady. Graham had a natural kindness with Noah. He didn't overdo it. He simply showed up. When Noah asked endless questions about bones, bandages, or whether doctors could really fix anything, Graham listened, then answered like it truly mattered. He let the boy crawl into his lap at the park, helped him build snow forts, and quietly reached for his hand crossing icy sidewalks. One evening, after a long shift, Graham knocked on Laya's door holding a small white box. "For you," he said. Inside, she found fresh bagels from a local bakery, still warm, with cream cheese and her favorite strawberry jam. "You remembered?" she asked, surprised. He shrugged. "You mentioned it once." She took a bite and smiled. "They're perfect." Later that week, another surprise arrived. When Noah got home from school, a brown package sat waiting on the couch. "Did you order something?" Laya asked. Noah shook his head, already tearing at the paper. Inside was a real medical kit, not a toy, but a child-sized version with working instruments. A real stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, bandages, and along the side, engraved in neat lettering, "Noah's Healing Kit." Laya stared at it, unable to speak. From the doorway, Graham rubbed the back of his neck. "I found a medical supply company that makes kits for teaching children," he said. "Figured we could make something that wouldn't fall apart." Noah beamed, holding the stethoscope to his chest. "Mom, I can hear my heartbeat." Laya felt the tears before she could stop them. She looked up at Graham. "Why would you do this?" He met her gaze. "Because you both deserve something that lasts." That night, while Noah slept on the couch with his new kit tucked beside him, Laya sat across from Walter at the small kitchen table. Snow tapped against the window as they shared a pot of chamomile tea. Walter looked at her for a long moment. "You know," he said, "I spent decades teaching medicine, ethics, what matters, but I never learned more than I did the night you gave me your last $10. She looked down. "It wasn't much. It was everything," he replied. "And now you've given my son something I never could." She looked up. "What's that?" "A reason to come home." Later, as Graham buttoned his coat at the door, Walter's words echoed in his mind. The old man stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You can build all the hospitals in Boston, Graham, but if you don't find where your heart can rest, you'll always be lost." Graham didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked across the room. Laya was gently pulling a blanket over Noah. She glanced up and smiled, quiet, genuine, tired in the way that came from giving more than she ever had. And something in Graham finally settled. It wasn't the hospitals, not the boardrooms, not the skyline. It was this place, this small apartment where hope lingered in the air, where laughter arrived in quiet bursts, where a golden-haired woman and a wide-eyed boy had let him in, and without even trying, had made it feel like home. The cold lingered as January crept in, but inside the small apartment where Laya and Noah lived, warmth had begun to take root. Not from the aging heater in the corner, but from something softer, slower, and much harder to name. One evening, after a long day of coordinating health screenings for Winter Haven, Laya and Graham sat on the front steps of the building, wrapped in their coats, sharing a thermos of hot tea. The city moved quietly around them, cars passing in the slush, distant laughter from a nearby cafe. Noah had already gone to sleep upstairs, his medical kit resting beside his pillow. Laya watched the steam rise from her cup and broke the silence first. "You don't talk much about your mom," she said gently. Graham was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. "She died when I was 10. Laya turned slightly, her hands tightening around the cup. "I remember her scent more than her face," he continued, "vanilla and lavender. She used to hum when she organized medical supplies at home. Never a full song, just pieces." He smiled, but it was tinged with something hollow. "After she passed, my dad shut down. Not angry, just gone. He went from reading bedtime stories to locking himself in his study at the hospital." "And you?" she asked softly. "I buried myself in school, then work. It felt like if I stayed busy enough, the silence wouldn't feel so loud." Laya nodded slowly. "I get that. Silence can be deafening." He glanced at her. "What about you?" She hesitated. Then, in a quiet voice, she said, "I met Noah's father when I was 22. He was charming, kind, or at least I thought so. We had plans, dreams." She paused, her eyes distant now. "When I told him I was pregnant, he said he wasn't ready. 2 weeks later, he left, changed his number, blocked me on everything." Graham's brow tightened, but he said nothing. "I had nothing. No money, no family who would help. I had to choose, keep the baby, and face everything alone, or she trailed off." "You chose Noah," he said. She smiled faintly. It was never really a choice. The moment I heard his heartbeat, I knew. He looked at her then, really looked. There was something in her face, not just strength, but peace. A quiet acceptance born from surviving the kind of storms most people couldn't even imagine. I never wanted pity, she added, but I do wish someone had seen me back then, not as a girl who made a mistake, but as a woman trying to make something right. I see you now, Graham said, his voice low. She looked at him, surprised. I mean it, he continued. You didn't just survive, Laya. You turned pain into purpose. You made a life for your son out of nothing. That's remarkable. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked quickly. Funny, she said, her voice a little rough. I was just thinking the same about you. Their laughter was quiet, shared, real. That night marked a shift, not loud or dramatic, but subtle. From that point on, their conversations stretched longer. What started as 5-minute chats became hour-long talks over late tea. They stopped filling silences with polite words and instead allowed them to exist comfortably, like soft space between notes in a song. It wasn't love yet, not quite, but it was something more powerful. Trust, recognition, and two people slowly learning that their scars were not weaknesses, but bridges. That healing didn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it arrived in the form of a listening ear, a quiet evening on cold steps, and the steady unfolding of stories kept too long in silence. The snow had returned, blanketing the city in white, as it did every December. But this year it felt gentler, like the city had softened just a little. Laya and Noah walked hand in hand toward their apartment, cheeks rosy from the cold, arms full of empty boxes and ribbons from the day's community health fair. Noah chatted beside her. Did you see Maria's face when she got the free medicine for her daughter? That was better than 1,000 Christmases. Laya laughed. You helped make that happen. Their building stood quiet under the snow, lights glowing from the windows. As they reached their door, Laya paused. Something was different. On the table just inside, where she always left her keys, sat a box wrapped in crisp white paper and a deep red satin bow. Noah gasped. Mom, there's a present. Laya frowned. That wasn't there this morning. Noah was already pulling the ribbon loose. Inside was no toy, no object, just a folded card. He opened it and read slowly. To the woman who changed the lives of 2 men. Would you let me spend forever writing the rest of our miracle together? Laya froze, heart skipping. From behind the Christmas tree, real, full, and twinkling, stepped Graham. He wore a dark sweater and held a small box. His smile was calm but sure, his eyes locked on hers. I never knew how to say this, he began. But a year ago, I met someone who gave her last $10 to a stranger, and everything I believed about love and strength changed. He stepped forward. You didn't just help my father, Laya. You helped me. You reminded me what matters, showing up, loving fully, being present. He opened the velvet box. Inside was a simple gold ring with a small, delicate stone. Will you let me be part of what you and Noah have built? Will you let me come home to you both every day for the rest of my life? Tears filled her eyes. Are you sure? She whispered. I didn't come into this with anything. Just a boy I had to raise and a life I didn't know how to fix. He took her hand gently. But you had everything I didn't, he said. Love, hope, a reason to keep going. And you gave them to me. Behind them, Noah stood still, the red bow in his hands. Walter stepped beside him, laying a gentle hand on his shoulder. This is the good part, he whispered. Laya looked at Graham, the man who had become part of their lives through warmth, not wealth. Through small things, late-night rides, handmade gifts, warm bagels on cold mornings. She nodded, tears falling freely now. Yes, she said. Yes, I will. Graham slid the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had always belonged there. Noah ran to them, throwing his arms around both. Does this mean I can call you Dad? He asked, his voice muffled in Graham's coat. Graham knelt and hugged him close. Only if you want to. Noah grinned. I want to. They stood there, the three of them, surrounded by pine lights and the hush of falling snow. 1 year ago, Laya gave away her last $10. Tonight, she had everything. Not because of wrapped gifts, but because of love. 1 year later, the house was filled with the scent of cinnamon and fresh pine. It was their first Christmas in the new home, a modest cottage on the edge of the city with white shutters and ivy trailing the porch railings. Nothing extravagant, but everything meaningful. Light poured through the windows, warm and golden, dancing off the garland draped over the mantel. In the living room, laughter echoed. Graham balanced a string of lights between his arms as Noah stood on tiptoe trying to reach the middle of the Christmas tree. It wasn't a plastic one this year. It was real, full, green, fragrant. The first real tree Noah had ever had. Almost there, Noah grinned, reaching with all his might. Laya walked in from the kitchen, wiping flour from her hands, her golden hair pulled back in a loose braid. She watched them, father and son, working together, covered in tinsel and joy. "There," Graham said, adjusting the final bulb. "What do you think?" Noah stepped back, his eyes wide. "It's perfect." Outside, snow had just begun to fall again, soft and slow, like a memory. The dining table behind them was set simply. Mugs of hot chocolate, a tray of freshly baked cookies, and 3 plates waiting for stories, not silverware. There were no piles of gifts under the tree, no bright packaging, no expensive boxes. But there were hand-drawn cards, a small knitted scarf Noah had made at school, and a little wooden ornament Graham had carved himself, shaped like a stethoscope with healer etched on the side. Laya came to stand beside Graham, wrapping her arm around his. He leaned his head toward hers without a word. Later that night, after the cocoa was finished and the lights dimmed, Laya peeked into Noah's room. He was already fast asleep, curled beneath a quilt, the medical kit still nestled in his arms. Graham joined her at the doorway. For a moment, they just stood there, quiet. Then Laya spoke, her voice a whisper. "I used to think I had nothing," she said. "There were days I believed I had lost everything." She turned to him, her eyes soft with reflection. "But maybe we have to lose everything first to find what really matters." Graham pulled her close, his voice equally low. "You found it," he said, "and then you gave it to us." The house around them was still. The only sound, the soft hum of the heater and the gentle hush of snow settling outside. In the living room, the Christmas tree glowed. It didn't need more. It was enough. They stepped back into the warmth, her hand in his, and the camera of the moment pulled slowly away, past the windows, past the softly flickering lights, until all that was left was the image of 3 people who had found each other in the most unexpected way. A woman who once had nothing, a man who once had everything but meaning, and a little boy who had wished for only one thing, for someone to come home. As the snow fell gently outside their window, a simple truth settled like peace. The greatest gifts are the ones that can't be wrapped. Thank you for watching this heartwarming story of hope, compassion, and the quiet miracles that can change a life forever. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or reminded you of the power of kindness, we invite you to be part of our growing community. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to support our channel, where we bring you tales that heal, inspire, and stay with you long after the screen fades. Until next time, keep believing in the goodness of people. And remember, sometimes the smallest acts create the biggest miracles. Stay warm, stay kind, stay with us.